All right, it was brought to my attention yesterday that some of y'all have not done the whole Git forking and creating a repo and setting it up on your machine. So please, if there's something I'm going over, I assume you've done, please tell me. In OOP, what did y'all use? I was told, was it NetBeans?
Yeah, we did use NetBeans. I used Eclipse because I couldn't get NetBeans.
How did you push it to GitHub?
Very, very manually.
Manually? It was all manually? Okay, well that's going to drive you nuts in this course. So let me show you basically how you should do it here for this class. So when you go to the class repository, and you'll know that this is the class repository because up here you'll see CSU-CS. So that's how you know it's part of the course, or of the CSU. And then there's a repository. The first thing you need to do is click fork. And when you click fork, it'll say, okay, mine says you've already forked it because I have already. Yours, if you have not forked it before, will say, hey, look, do you want to fork it to your username? You click yes, and then it'll give you to a screen and it'll say, okay, I'm forking, give me some time. And after a couple minutes, it'll eventually get you to something that looks like this. Now, very important, this is your repository and this is the one you're working with. Did y'all do forking in OOP? I assume so.
Not really.
Not really? My goodness. All right. You'll know it's yours because you'll start with your username / the repository, and notice it says forked from. This is the repository you need to be working from, not the other one. So make sure that whenever you clone from this one. Because if you clone from the course repository, it will not let you push because you don't have permission. All right. So the way you clone, and there's different ways to do this, unfortunately, and I have not found the easiest way to clone. And when I say there's different ways, they changed it over the summer, and students are trying to figure out what the best way is moving forward. The way I prefer to do it is with SSH. So make sure when you click code, you click on SSH, not HTTPS. You click on SSH. You copy it. We'll move it over, and then you'll do git clone like that. You hit enter, and if everything was magically set up correctly, it'll directly clone it. If, on the other hand, it asks for your username and password, this will not work because GitHub no longer allows you to use your username and password. So, if you want to be able, if that is what comes up, do GitHub SSH keys is the way I recommend doing it. Generating a new SSH key. Hey, look, it's the first one. Go to Linux. You can read all this. But what it comes down to is open up your terminal, run this command, it'll generate a key for you. And when it is generated, let's see, all right, you can use SSH agent if you want. What I prefer, okay. They're not going to tell you? Wow. Okay, when that happens, I'll tell you what to do. cat.ssh id_.pub. Now make sure this is clear. Some of you all have not gone through public and private key encryption. You are allowed to show anyone your public key, which is what I'm about ready to do. Do not show anyone your private key. Your private key would be something in that file. Don't show the people that, because that's actually your identity when it comes to authenticating using public-private key. But you can do the public one, and so here it is. I will cat it, which will print it to the screen. And it's this long thing. Okay, that's great. So you're going to copy that. And by the way, in Linux, the simplest way to copy is to highlight it, and that immediately copies it. That's like Control-C. And then middle mouse button click will paste it. That's like Control-V. So a little different, but I find it much easier. All right, once that's done, what you'll need to do is go back to your profile, go over to settings, go over to not account security. Is it account security? Let me see. SSH and GPG keys. New SSH key. Notice I've already added some. You can title it whatever, but here's where you would paste it in. Title whatever, add SSH key, save it. And once that is done, you will now be able to clone without a username and password even. It will just clone it from your machine onto your, clone from GitHub onto your machine, just like you saw me do over here earlier. All right. Everyone got that? Okay. Now, then, just for clarification, csci 315. I went through this last time, but I'll go and do it again. If you make a change, I'll just add a couple of new lines, and you want to push that change. Actually, I'll put right here, this is a new line, and you want to push it up to GitHub, which means you want it to be under your repository. So let me jump back and show you. Lab1, Unix commands. Notice right now that that line does not exist over here. I've only added it on this file right here. You can add Unix commands, and that marks it to be in the next commit. And then you create the commit, git commit -m lab01 update, and that creates a commit. Now, the reason why these two are different is because you may add multiple files, and in advanced projects, you may only want to be able to add a couple of files and leave the other ones alone because you were just messing with it. You don't want to automatically add it. So that's why Git requires you to specify which files you want to add. In this case, we only had one. I created a commit. Now, just because I created a commit doesn't mean it's up there yet. For example, if I refresh this, it's still not up here. Why? Because I simply committed it to my local machine right here. I did not commit it to GitHub. I simply committed it to my machine. To commit it to GitHub, I must push it. And so I push it, there it goes. Since the nice thing about the SSH key is now that it's been set up, you don't have to do username or password. So this is going to actually save you some time, even though it is a bit of a headache to set up the SSH keys. Now if I refresh, here's the new line. It is now pushed up to GitHub. All right, good. I recorded that first. Any questions? Some of y'all may have some trouble setting up the keys. If you have, if you run into trouble and said, hey, look, the instructions were bad, it should have said this instead, please tell me so I can tell all the other students. Again, they just changed this. Actually, I think it was August 13th is when they changed it. So they literally changed it this month after doing it the other way for nearly a decade. All right, now, step 2. So this is your repository. One thing to keep in mind is notice that in my repo, I only have course materials lab1 readme.md, but in the course one, I have already uploaded lab2. What has happened is, since I have forked this repo, I have added or updated the course repository. Since your repository is a fork from a previous instance or situation, you have not received the updates to your forked repo. So you need to figure out or need to know how to pull those updates from the course repo into your current repository. I will show you how to do that. When you do that, when you want to do that, go back to your repository, do git remote-v. What this is telling you is what the remotes are. Git is a little confusing because it's a distributed repository system. It's not a straightforward, push and pull. What's happening is Git is allowed to specify where you want to push and pull. You can have a whole list of repositories that you are connected to, and this is how Git tells you which one. Right now it's only connected to, or this repository is only connected to my repo, because you can tell right here. So we want to add another remote or another connection, so to speak, to the course repository. How do we do that? Well, we do git remote add, and I'm going to call it upstream. The reason I'm calling it upstream is because a lot of the literature loves to use the word upstream. So if you have problems, you can Google upstream. How do I set up upstream? And it should be able to tell you how to set this all up. Really, if I was really accurate, I'd call it a class repo or class or something, or course or something. But I'm just going to call it upstream so you can easily Google it. Again, you want to copy, I highly recommend SSH or whatever version you use to set up your own repo. So copy this one as well. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to paste it. Double check that it does say csu.cs and not your repository name. When I hit enter, it's not going to it's going to look like it didn't do anything. That means it succeeded. But if I do a git remote -v, now we see origin, which is my repository, because you can see that right here. Origin, linked to mine, and then upstream, linked to the class repository. So now that I have a connection, or I've at least told Git how to get to the course repository, I need to actually pull from it. I do git pull upstream master. What that's telling it to do is pull from the upstream repository, which I've set up, and pull from the master branch. And right now we're not doing branches, so when in doubt, the branch is master. Ooh, I didn't like that, ignore that, or I didn't like a couple of things. It wanted me to set something up, but that's okay. It pulled, and now it's saying it's merging master of GitHub, blah, blah, blah here. That's fine, that's normal. A lot of times what happens is when it sees a bunch of changes and it needs to try and do a merge, Git will automatically merge it for you. This is actually Git telling you it just did all the work successfully. It just needs you to confirm that it merged. If you're in this screen and you see a bunch of these tildes, that means you're in VI. The simple way to do this is you go Shift:, so notice the cursor's down here, X, which will save and quit, and then I'll hit Enter. And now the course repository code has been pulled to my machine. Very important, it's on my machine. It is not on my GitHub yet. For example, I do an ls here, I see lab 01, lab 2, but if I were to go over to my repository, you'll notice it's not there. Okay, let's see how much paying attention you've done. So the updates are on my machine, but they're not on my repository on GitHub. How do I put them on my repository on GitHub?
You push it.
You push, okay, good, great. We are all paying attention. I wasn't trying to be tricky. It was a check to make sure. All right, there, push. And there it is. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Why don't you have to specify git push origin master? Because you have 2 remotes now, right?
By default, if you don't, when you do git push, it's going to go to the first remote that you've set up, which is origin, and then push to the default branch, which is master. So doing this in this case is the same as doing that. They're actually the same command. Git actually filled that in for me without specifying. Now, keep in mind that there's been some debate, I don't know the correct word, and sometimes master is not the branch that is by default. It may be main, or it may actually be the word default as well, depending on what your repository is. For mine, it is master. Now, great question. Any others? Okay.